Hello, everyone. Welcome to the PMI's 35th anniversary this year, PMI Rochester. And in the celebration of those 35 years, we are interviewing past presidents. And today we have Larry Heininger, who has not just served once, but twice, from 96 to 97 and from 2006 to 2007. Welcome, Larry, and thank you so much for your time today. One of the first
Glad to be here.
Great. One of the first questions we wanted to ask you is, how did you become passionate about project management? How did this happen?
Okay, way back when, in 93 is when I became aware of PMI Rochester.
Okay.
And picture as a young engineer, my first title on my business card was project engineer. 4.5 years after college, I took the second part of my exams and passed. So then I was now a licensed professional engineer.
Okay.
And immediately my business card changed to project manager.
Ah.
Okay. So, you know, the ironic thing is, just because you've proven that you have technical capability in your field of endeavor does not mean you're a good project manager.
I think we've all seen that.
Okay, so that
Yes.
would have been 83, March of 83, when I got my notification from New York State that I had passed the exam. And okay, so here we go, 10 years later, and I'm managing projects and doing okay in city of Rochester streets and things like that. And then one month in the Rochester Engineering Journal, the RES, which PMI used to advertise in, along with the mechanicals and the electricals and the what have yous, there was a luncheon, and the topic, the presenter was Keen Consulting, Keene, and I guess they are some kind of IT whatnot. Anyway, the topic was the ideal attributes of a project manager. What's the makeup of people who are successful at project management?
All right.
I thought, well, that sounds interesting, that someone actually kind of benchmarks the personality traits of who's going to be a good project manager. So I went to the lunch, and sitting to my right was Russ Hurlbut, who was managing the Xiaomen project. And sitting to my left was another president who's since passed, Ed O'Connor. He was the president after me. And Ed was at Bausch. And Ed was working on the India project.
So Bausch is the India project, and I'm sorry, you said the Xiaomen project, that was
Russ.
Kodak?
Yeah, that was Kodak building they built a big plant in China because the Chinese were big users of film in the day.
Yes.
And they thought this would really boost their film. But by the time they actually Russ can tell you, by the time they got the plant up and running, everything had gone digital. So what Ed was doing is he was, the Indians were big fans of Ray-Bans. So big a fan that they made a plant in India to build Ray-Bans, aviators and wayfarers and things like that. Okay. And he got assigned the project to make it happen. And Ed was actually a mechanical from Clarkson too. He said, when I got there, somebody in management bought this property. There was no water, there was no sewer, there were no roads. He said, we could have bought property on the moon,
Oh, no.
But anyway, they were very welcoming. All right, I'm sitting there with these guys that are managing huge international projects. Okay. And I'm doing these, little street projects, or, all well and good. And I'm like, I'm not on the same level as these guys. Okay. At that time, I think the chapter might have had 60 to 70 members. They were almost exclusively Kodak engineers. But they were very glad, hey, we're going places, come with us. We'd love to have you aboard.
Yes.
And I thought, hearing about Keen, what they did is they went through a list of personality traits. If someone says, I'd really like to be a project manager, and they would kind of evaluate their personality traits and said, okay, these are the things that you're a little weak on, and these are the things that we can work with you on to make you so you'll be successful at this.
Huh.
Okay. And, I coach soccer, or I did. And so I could work with a kid and say, listen, you need to learn your left foot. You need to learn how to trap. You need, if you don't have these technical skills, you can be the fastest runner in the world, or you can, but you got to be able to kick a ball, okay,
Yes.
or stop the ball. So anyway, I started, and the other thing was, I go to my civil engineering monthly meetings. Well, those are my competitors. They're not going to give me a job. They're not going to give me a project. Whereas if I go to PMI, I'm rubbing shoulders with Kodak people. And there were a few times people said, a lot of opportunity at Kodak, a lot of opportunity at Kodak. Well, So that's how I got in. And the next thing, I remember when Russ asked Joe Lucas, said, would you like to be president next year? Because he had to identify who's going to be the president. And Joe said, yeah, I'd be very honored.
Wow.
And then I became the program chair because the guy that was doing it was going to go get his MBA. And so he was
going to be a little busy.
He was overwhelmed. Right. And so mid-year, they said, would you step in as programs? And of course I said, sure, why, of course I'll do that. And so I had programs for half a year, and then I was programs for a full year while Joe was president.
Okay.
So he could see how I worked. And programs really, back then, and maybe even now, is the most important part. If you don't have a program every month, you haven't got a club. Okay. It's kind of like Ed Sullivan on Sunday Night TV. Ed Sullivan always had a really big show. We got a really big show. We're going to have the Beatles. We're going to have, whatever. If you didn't have something, and I was like, all right, September you start. October we do this.
Yes.
January or December we'll have the Christmas thing. January we'll have the annual meeting. Then we have our symposium. Then in fact, back then we didn't even have the symposium. We were too small. Okay, we once we got a critical mass of 100 people, we did our first symposium.
Okay, you're talking about PDD? The
PDD.
Okay, and it started off as a half day, right?
Probably, but you didn't have that, and so when I went to, I went to Boston. That was my first international symposium was Boston as the president, and then the next year I went to Chicago. And I would say, listen, just because you hear people doing these PDDs, if you're a little chapter with 50 people, do not do it, okay? Mm-hmm. It will take you down to your knees. It will just, the level of work and trying to get the speakers, and then people drop out, and, all
the management of it,
is just crazy. So anyway, moving on, that's how I got to be the president. And so, number two, what did the role mean to you was basically keep the ship on an even keel and keep it out in deep water. Don't put the ship on the rocks, okay? There are things that you need to do. And then once you have your symposium in May, and then you wrap it up in June, you take a couple months off and, have your elections, and everything goes in a cycle. Mm-hmm. Just, don't bite off more than you can chew.
Okay.
So the one big thing back as program chair that first year, the other thing with programs is we had to mail out the program. There was no internet.
Oh, yes.
So, you think about it. Our lunches were $10 at the Maplewood, which doesn't exist anymore, on Maple Street. And everybody could leave their Kodak office at like 10 of noon, quarter of noon, drive over to the Maplewood, sit down, have the same chicken and the same salad, and be back in their chair at Kodak at 1:15. And Kodak paid their membership, so we got a big check. for all those 65 Kodakers.
Wow.
I think the only woman in the chapter was Linda Balducci, or a couple, there were very, very few.
Okay.
And, all the programs were guys at Kodak talking about their project at Kodak, how they're doing bringing in some new equipment or doing this, that, and the other thing, whatever. So it was kind of a built-in, and when I went to these things, I said, out in Chicago, I'm like, look, we have a chapter of 85 people and 70 of them are from Kodak. And then people look at me, yeah, okay, great,
Right.
because they're scrambling to try to have a chapter,
Right.
and get people involved. And you could go to someone at Kodak and say, listen, I think it would be good for you to do this in PMI.
And they'll do it.
And they would do it, but they also had corporate support.
Right.
To do it. Not like, oh no, you got to do that on your own time. No, if you were saying I'm working on this for PMI, oh, fine, that's good. So that was, basically just keep things going. But the one